Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and I'm Gary Michuta, your host and sensei for this hour. It's great to be with you today. It is May, and of course that's the month of Mary. And so we want to at least have a couple of shows that we talk specifically about Mary and sharing Mary with non-Catholics. And you know, you ever hear the old saying, you know, Mary is quite contrary? Well, you know, that's because Protestants have trouble with the Blessed Virgin Mary. For many of them, they see Marian doctrine as not being in Scripture. Some of them actually see it as against Scripture. And so there is a kind of fear, an endemic fear within Protestantism of giving Mary her fair due. And so today's program, we're going to be talking about how you can help non-Catholics, help Protestants make Mary less scary. And to help us do that, we're going to have Matt Swaim join us on the other side of the break. As you know, Matt works with the Coming Home Network, which literally has helped over 1,000 Protestant clergy come to full communion with the Catholic Church. And so he works with people on the journey to the Catholic Church, coming into the church on a daily basis. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to make Mary less scary for non-Catholics, and also 5 titles of the Mother of Jesus that Protestants would feel safe to use, I guess you could say. And, you know, that's good because many times truth has sometimes the whole truth and nothing but the truth can be difficult to handle all at once. Sometimes it's we grasp the fullness of truth through baby steps, you know, gleaming on from one truth that shines light into further truth, and eventually you see the whole thing. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to be talking about making Mary less scary. Matt Swaim, other side of the break. As always, we're going to have our Finding of the Fallacy. Today's Finding of the Fallacy is the appeal to authority. And also meet the early church fathers. In each episode, we learn about an early church father. Today's early church father, I don't think is very well known in Catholic circles. His name is Theodort of Syre. Theodort of Syre. And so, without further ado, want to give my shout out, my tip, my hello and howdy to all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Great to see familiar names. Hi, Joan. Hi, Carlita Way, 101. Elizabeth, everybody. Michelle, good to see you. And also, it's great to have you on board via radio around the United States and also via podcast around the world through our flagship station, or website, I should say, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org, or through our handy-dandy phone app. You can download it. Virgin Most Powerful phone app will give you access to all our shows, not just Hands-On Apologetics, but also all the great shows that Virgin Most Powerful produces. And, yeah, so if you have a question for Matt, maybe you're non-Catholic and, you know, he have some difficulty with Mary, I'm sure Matt would be glad to talk to you. The toll-free number to call us is 888-526-2151. That is 888-526-2151. And I should also throw out the Dojo mailbox. This is the way to get a hold of me, folks. It's questions@handsonapologetics.com. All one word, questions@handsonapologetics.com. And that is the direct Dojo mailbox. And I do try to answer every email I get. Let's see. Why don't we have quite a bit on our plate here, so why don't we start digging, shall we? Let's go into our Finding the Fallacy segment. Today's Finding the Fallacy is the appeal to authority. The argument from authority, which is also called an appeal to authority, is a form of defeasible argument in which the opinion of an authority on a topic is used as evidence to support the argument. And it's well known as a fallacy, though some consider it that it is used in a cogent form when all sides of a discussion agree on the reliability of the authority in the given context. Other authors, however, consider it a fallacy to cite an authority on the discussion of a topic as the primary means of supporting the argument. And so basically quoting experts and expert opinion on whether something is or is not, or whatever the topic is in itself an appeal to authority. It's the weakest of all arguments, and it could be fallacious if that's really the only evidence you have is a person's expert opinion on the matter. And actually, I was on Catholic Answers Live recently, and one of the callers mentioned that when we appeal to the early church fathers, are we committing the fallacy of authority? And, you always think of the best answers after the fact. But I think I did okay answering them. But anyway, folks, if anyone brings that up, because we do appeal to early church fathers, isn't that a fallacious appeal to authority? Well, no, because the appeal to authority really has to do with using somebody's expertise as evidence, okay? When we appeal to the early church fathers, however, we're not appealing to their expertise as much as we're appealing to their eyewitness or witness testimony to the ancient faith. And that's a very different deal, because obviously a witness to an ancient faith is entirely different than a person's educated opinion. Okay, and so if it's just you're appealing to somebody because they're an expert, and since they're expert, they could be used as evidence, that's a fallacious argument. However, if you're appealing to someone as evidence or a witness to a belief existing at a particular age, that actually is bona fide evidence. So keep that in mind, folks. That's our Finding the Fallacy for today. Appeal to authority. Now, let me jump into our Meet the Early Church Father for today, who's Theodort of Syre. Born sometime around 393, died around 466. Theodort was born in Antioch, in, like I said, year 393, 423. When he was about the age of 30 years old, he was, somewhat against his will, made Bishop of Syre, which is a small town of Syria, about 2 days' journey from Antioch. And our source, Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers, points out 2 days' journey by donkey, not by automobile. There he governed the diocese very capably for more than 40 years. Statements to the fact that Theodore was a fellow student of the arch-heretic Nestorius and John of Antioch under the tutelage of Theodore of Mopsuestia may very well be true. But they rest on very little or no real evidence. He was nevertheless a product of the Antiochian school of theology and was indeed the last of its greatest theologians of Antioch. Theodore, in his Antiochian training, was convinced that Cyril of Alexandria's theology was heretical, and in 431 he wrote a no longer extant polemical treatise against Cyril of Alexandria. At the Council of Ephesus, by the way, Theodore sided with John of Antioch, even after Nestorius had been condemned. And he wrote a comprehensive book in 5 books against Cyril and against the Council of Ephesus. Jurgen says that he was a firm man, a firm principle of great moral rectitude, and although the so-called Creed of Union of Cyril accepted in 433 was probably composed by Theodore himself in the autumn of 432, Theodore refused to accept the Union of Cyril and the Eastern churches under the original terms, and joined in only after the demand for a formal recognition of the condemnation of Nestorius was dropped. Now, however, Theodore was very soon engaged in the struggle against another heresy, which was called Monophysitism, the heresy which was, by the way, diametrically opposed to Nestorianism. Encapsulated basically, Nestorius believed that Jesus' Nestorian believed Jesus' two natures, divine and human, resided in two persons in a sense. So Jesus was two persons. Monophysitism is the opposite heresy, where the two natures are so combined they actually come up with a kind of third nature, a divine human nature. Both are wrong, by the way. Both are not the Orthodox faith. So Cyril, when he succeeded in Alexandria by Dioscorus, who was a Monophysite, there was a synod of Ephesus in 449. Dioscorus succeeded in deposing Theodoret and forcing him into exile. Theodoret appealed to Pope Leo I, and Leo declared the proceedings null and void. And this, of course, Pope Leo I gives this council the infamous name of the Robber Synod of Ephesus. And, of course, that was Theodoret was reinstalled in the see by the emperor in 450. Then Theodoret appears once again in history at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. There was, however, considerable reluctance to seat him, obviously, because of his Nestorian past ties. So only when he agreed to anathematize Nestorius, the person who believed that Jesus was two persons, two natures, and all who did not confess that the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, who divide into two, the only Son, the only begotten. Once he signed on to that, then he was allowed to sit at the council. With that, he was formally reinstated as Bishop of Tyre, and he was recognized by the Fathers of the Council as an Orthodox teacher. So eventually, Theodoret makes it into the Orthodox faith. Theodoret was a man of principle, and there's no reason to suppose that he anathematized Nestorius was not, that it was totally honest and his own conviction. Anyway, coming up next, talking about Mary. We're going to talk about Mary with Matt Swaim, Making Mary Less Scary Than Now. Stay tuned.
Jesus said in Matthew 26, "Stay awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation." According to St. Ephrem, Jesus, who feared nothing, experienced fear and asked to be freed from death, although he knew it was impossible. How much more must we persevere in prayer before temptation assails us, so that we may be freed when the test has come? May God grant that we may withstand temptation and carry out His will in all things.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands on Apologetics. And yes, Mary is quite contrary for many non-Catholics, and she's also a little scary, too, if you want to add to that. And to help us make her less scary, we have our good friend, Matt Swaim, with us. Matt, of course, grew up in a strong Christian home, attended United Baptist, Nazarene and Free Methodist congregations along the way. He eventually did join the Catholic Church and became a member of the staff of the Coming Home Network in 2016. His primary role is working to coordinate, promote new videos, and all other media content. And so you can check out his work at chnetwork.org. And here he is, folks, the man, the legend, Matt Swaim. Matt, welcome aboard.
Gary, I never know how to react when you introduce me so kindly.
Oh, you want? Well, I could go the other way if you'd like.
You could. You did accidentally say that I was a Baptist in there somewhere.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, that's about as hard of a insult as you've ever thrown at me. So, I don't know.
I've been fumbling around today. I don't know what the deal is.
Quarantine has broken all of our brains. I'm hoping that we just get through this next hour. We'll see.
Yeah, I hear you. But anyway, your bio is so important, Matt, because you've lived this. You have been you grew up non-Catholic. You actually been to several different Protestant congregations, and so you know how Mary looks to non-Catholics.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I know how she looked to me, which is kind of like, they have this there's this memory principle they call inattentional blindness, where they have these people sit in a room and they have them watch a video of a basketball team and they have to count how many times the ball gets passed. And somewhere in the middle of the thing, a guy in a gorilla suit walks right through the screen. And at the end, they ask people, how many people saw the gorilla, and nobody saw the gorilla, right, walking right through the room, because they were so focused on the basketball passes. And I feel like that's kind of analogous to how my understanding of Mary was. She was there the whole time, but she was practically invisible because I was always focusing on the different things that were going on in the picture so very often. And I was trying to think about this, because someone might say, well, why would we focus on any of these figures from salvation history? The important one is Jesus. Except we did sing songs about some of those figures. So we sang about Noah, the Lord told Noah to build him an arky, right? I don't know if you ever sang that one.
Yeah.
We sing about Father Abraham having many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham, and then you're moving your limbs. Sing Little David, play on your harp, hallelujah, hallelujah. I mean, these are the songs that we sang in VBS and in Sunday school. And so these other figures were plenty of fair game to sing songs about. But the only Protestant song I could think of that was actually about Mary, it's a pretty recent addition, and that would be Mary Did You Know, which is not exactly theologically on point with what we know from the scriptures about Mary. Some of that stuff she didn't know, but yeah, guess what? She did know that she was going to be bearing the Son of God. Gabriel kind of filled her in on that part of the Annunciation. So yeah, it's not that I think that I ignored her on purpose. It's just that she just wasn't really in the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And by the way, I want to thank you because now I'll be singing those songs all day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll be able to
sorry to all the listeners. I apologize.
But and I think your experience is not atypical. It's just Mary's just one of the background characters in the New Testament for many Protestants. And when they look at how Catholics view Mary, it's almost like, why are you overemphasizing? We agree she's holy. We agree she's mother of Jesus and all that stuff. But why not John the Baptist or
Yeah, why not some of these other people? Well, there's so many pieces to this, but I think one of the big pieces connects to sort of an aspect of Protestant theology in general, at least my particular theology, that has extensions in the way that it applies to what Protestants think about the communion of saints in general, or the idea of confession, or the idea of the sacrifice of the Mass. And it kind of rolls back to 1 Timothy 2, chapter 5, where Paul says to Timothy, he says, there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And most people kind of pause it right there when they're making a theological argument, because that's verse 5 of 1 Timothy 2. And the broad application of that is that it's you and it's Jesus and nobody in between. And so the way that Catholics talk about Mary is, at least gives Protestants the illusion that we've just put somebody in the middle here that is an unnecessary obstacle, when we can go directly to Christ. The same way we would have thought about, why are you putting a priest between me and God in the sacrament of reconciliation? Or why are you putting Saint Anthony in between me and God when I'm trying to find my car keys? Right? What this is all, you creating unnecessary obstacles in the picture. And I found that theology had a lot of implications beyond the Catholic arguments, which I wasn't really making, because when I was on my way into the church, most of it was me not realizing I was on my way into the Catholic Church, because I was in the middle of central Kentucky, and there weren't any Catholics for me to talk about this with. It was me just reading books, right, of dead people.
Right.
But the way that it manifested for me is, well, do I need some pastor up there telling me what the Word of God says when I got a Bible in my house, right? So there's this sort of general sort of cultural thing in Protestantism that sees anybody that comes between you and Jesus not as someone who's, reaching a hand out to draw you closer, but as someone who's like acting like a bodyguard so you can't get close to him, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense. It's a kind of reductionism. It's like, well,
yeah.
I don't need this, and ultimately boiled down to, it's, it's just me, the Bible, and Jesus.
Well, I'm so glad you said reductionism, because I think that characterizes this whole theology. And if you want to talk to Protestants of most varieties about all these things that divide, you have to understand that there's a reductionism. We might say from our end, or reductio ad absurdum, right? Like reduction to the craziest, like minimalist point. But, a lot of the arguments that I had, and this is why when you get involved with a Protestant, and you get sucked into like a justification wormhole, if that's ever happened to you, it's because, the minimalist is like, it wants to break the whole thing down into the answer to one question, which is, what must I do to be saved?
Right.
Which,
right.
If Mary is not part of the what must I do to be saved, then just move her off the page, get her off the stage. Let's focus on what must I do to be saved. But again, and I'm only in a really big picture argument here. But Gary, why do we eat? I mean, someone might say, so that you can get nutrients into your body. Okay, well, inject them into my arm, right?
Yeah,
but,
right.
But if that's the most basic reason why we eat, then that's one thing. And if that's the only reason we eat, then why are we doing it at a table as a family? Why am I making this taste good? Why am I taking something that's already good and putting hot sauce on it? Yeah. Why am I sitting back afterwards? Why am I thinking, if I'm going to invite my friends over, I should invite them over for a meal? Like, we have this sort of understanding that it's more than just taking in vitamins. But when it comes to salvation, we're going to reduce it to the very most minimal thing we can possibly do to not go to hell. I mean, that seems kind of crazy, that this is the biggest question in our lives, and we're going to make that one the most pinpoint, like, tiniest thing that we can find. So when you start talking to somebody about Mary, bear in mind you're not necessarily arguing with, like, what they think about this verse in the Bible, like Revelation 12:1. You're talking about a whole mentality that says anything that you're putting in the mix is something I could trip over on my way to Jesus.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, I imagine you probably wouldn't have very many friends coming over your house if you're just going to break out the multivitamin.
Right. I'm like, hey, who wants to come over for an IV? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I love your point, because it's true. That's not the era that we normally live in. We're maximalist. We're not minimalist. We're not just going, okay, well, let's boil life down to some basic functions, and we'll just do basic functions till we die. It's
no way to live, man.
I mean, come on. I know. except when it comes to then apparently, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah,
another thing. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, usually what happens is when you reduce it down to just me and Jesus, then when people who are outside that belief system start challenging you about, well, why should you believe in Jesus? Who is Jesus? How do you know your Jesus is the true Jesus and the Mormon Jesus isn't? Then you're lost because you basically have cut away all of reality and, made Jesus into this almost a caricature, self-caricature.
Jesus is not Mork from Orc dropped down in like an egg on the Earth's surface who occasionally has these communications with the Father like Mork has with Orson, right?
Yeah.
There's the context in which Jesus came into the world matters. Like, and this is part of what helped kind of shape me on the Mary question is understanding basically Christology 101. Because that's what all the Mariology stuff is about. It's about Christology. It's an extension of a robust Christology. If you want to really double down on the fact that Jesus was truly God and truly man, there are some implications to that. Among them, if Jesus was truly man and his DNA is coming from Mary, then if you have like a weird way that you say certain words in your family because that's the way your parents said those words, Jesus would have had those things. If you have attached or detached earlobes because of your parents, Jesus would have had attached or detached earlobes because of Mary. Like, it's genetic whether you can roll your tongue or not, Gary. Based on whether or not Mary could roll her tongue, Jesus could or could not roll his tongue. Like, the incarnation has implications. Like, Mary's not some just like random like holding cell. She's not an incubator. She's just not some like surrogate who got hired for this. Yeah. There's like real, like literal, and I say this in the most literal way possible. There is literal skin in the game for Mary.
Yeah, right. Yeah, especially with the emphasis on being saved by the blood of the cross.
Yeah.
Being saved.
Where's the DNA from that blood coming from?
Yeah, because of the virgin birth, it's wholly from Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, but the thing is, how do you communicate that to non-Catholics? Do you work on Christology first and then introduce them to Mary? Or, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so for me, it was a combination of a couple things. I think it kind of depends on who you're talking to. And this goes back to something I feel like we talk about every time, is that the bulk of apologetics is listening. You got to figure out what their hang-ups are. For me, it was a lot of Christology and a lot of typology.
Very good.
But
okay,
you kind of have to listen.
I hear the music.
Yeah.
We're chatting with Matt Swaim about making Mary less scary for non-Catholics. We'll be right back after the break, folks. Listen to Hands on Apologetics.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. It's www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR. Live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE, US 1.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands-on Apologetics. And, I forgot to mention in the first break, folks, many of us are stationed in place. Well, you could do apologetics in place. Please, help evangelize. And while you do it, can you please help spread the word about the show and the station? So for those on social media, if you could like us or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Hands-on Apologetics, we'd totally appreciate it. And let's go back to the man, the legend, none other than Matt Swaim. And Matt, right before the break, you were talking about how you started opening up to Mary first by kind of getting a more robust understanding of who and what Jesus is, and also typology. Yeah. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, so I was trying to jot the notes and think of the essential elements. So the whole thing of going from essentialism to like this plenitude of faith was a big part of it, right? Yeah. Going from what must I do to be saved, or what do I get to do on my way to be saved? That was a big transition. Ken Howell has like this whole article on like conversions on our website at chnetwork.org, and I think he refers to it as going from sola fide to plena fides, right? From faith alone to like faith with everything on it, right? It's like a burger's great, but a burger with everything on it's amazing. The Christology thing, you and I just hit on a little bit. Like there's these implications, even just the biological implications. The other one that we didn't mention, but I think is fascinating, is that every time a woman has a baby, a portion of DNA from that child remains in her body forever. So like Jesus' DNA, like a chunk of it would have been inside of Mary. So like the assumption of Mary is like just kind of finishing the job in a way, right? Of the ascension of Jesus. So I mean, I think the biological implications fascinated me quite a little bit. But then the typology was really fascinating. And Ken Hensley and I talk about this all the time. When we used to like look at a topic and what the Bible had to say about it, we would do a word study. So if the topic's baptism, you look up how many times the word baptism occurs in the Bible, and those are the times the Bible talks about baptism. Whereas if you look at the Catholic picture and the Church Fathers and the Catechism and even the rite of something like baptism, they're talking about Noah. They're talking about crossing the River Jordan. They're talking about literally any time water and God is involved, right? And so that whole understanding really unlocked a lot of things. It helped me understand Mary as the new Eve. Eve said no. Mary said yes. What happened in the Garden of Eden with the serpent was undone when instead of a demon visiting Eve, an angel visited Mary, and she agreed with God's plan instead of disobeying God's plan. This is like a game changer. The Ark of the Covenant thing, I think early on, that was the one that was the stunner, right? That when you read 2 Samuel 6 and David welcoming the ark into the hill country as Mary is being welcomed by Elizabeth into the hill country, the ark goes and stays in the home of a priest. Mary goes and stays in the home of Elizabeth, who's married to a priest. David leaps when the ark enters town. John the Baptist leaps in the womb of Elizabeth when Mary comes to town. David says, how can it be that the ark of the Lord should come to me? Elizabeth says, how can it be that the mother of my Lord should come to me? Inside the ark, you've got the Ten Commandments. You've got the priestly rod of Aaron. You've got the manna from the desert. Inside of Mary's womb, you have the fulfillment of the law. You have the high priest forever. You have the bread of life. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant is like a really cool thing to throw at somebody. The Ark is not worshipped, right? The Israelites didn't worship the Ark, but they carried it before them in battle on Mary, you don't worship Mary, but guess what? How many times in Christian history have people carried statues of her into battle? I mean,
yeah.
It's wild. I mean, look at the Battle of Lepanto. It's like, okay, we don't have an Ark of the Covenant, but we got Our Lady. Let's unite the Catholic nations to pray for her help. I mean, so that, I think the Ark of the Covenant typologically was like the big one for me.
Yeah, I love how you lay that out. Just with those two parallels or titles, Maria's New Eve and Maria's Ark of the Covenant.
These are not new titles that like Steve Ray and Scott Hahn came up with either.
Right. Yeah,
it's like Saint Irenaeus. Like
Luke uses it. It's there.
Yeah.
But it, and I think that's a major fear too with non-Catholics is that they think by giving Mary these titles, she's kind of encroaching on Jesus's turf. But if you look at it, like with Mary as New Eve, Eve was not the cause of the fall of humanity in the sense that when she partook of the fruit, we didn't all die in her. We died in Adam, but she contributed to it, So she was part of it, but she wasn't the cause, primary cause. Same thing with the Ark of the Covenant. Like you said, they didn't worship a box, but rather they worship, God who was enthroned above the box.
Yeah, and on top of that, literally on top of that, you got a couple of angels, right? But this is one of those. The Ark of the Covenant it changes kind of a lot when it comes to Protestant objections to Catholic stuff in general, because we'll say no statues in church, right? Because God said no statues, except for the time that God said 2 statues on top of the Ark, right? So you got that, but again, this. Well, let's look at something like the perpetual virginity of Mary. Who is it? Uzzah? Who's the guy that like the guys are stumbling as they're walking through, and Uzzah touches the box and he like gets struck dead. All right.
Yeah,
let me ask you this: if you're Saint Joseph and you have a decent understanding of like the Old Testament and that Uzzah touched the Ark of the Lord and was struck dead, do you think you're gonna just treat Mary like a regular old man might treat his wife? I'm just saying, like,
right.
I mean, the last guy that touched the Ark, was vaporized on the spot practically. So I'm just saying that there are implications to that typology that kind of help fill in the blanks on some of the other basic Catholic doctrines.
Yeah, very good. So in a way, by honoring Mary in this way, we're not detracting from Jesus, but we're actually emphasizing and making concrete and real, who and what Jesus is.
Well, I mean, take a title like Mother of God. Mother of God is not about the mother part of that sentence. That phrase is not zeroed in on mother. It's zeroed on the fact that Jesus is God.
Yeah.
Right? So that title, and really any title for Mary, if you dig down deep, and you don't even have to dig very deep to find it, is a title that basically affirms the divinity or humanity of Jesus or both.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just the extension of a robust Christology. So, yeah, typology was huge in helping me fill in those blanks.
Yeah, very good. But in your Protestant tradition, is typology accepted or used a lot?
It depends on the topic.
Okay.
So, like, if you are into the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel and rapture theology and stuff like that, then you're all about reading into certain things that have nothing to do with current events, but like, if they follow kind of a political trajectory, that there's that. And I'm being cynical because that's a very kind of minimal group of people who do that. Yeah. Prophecy, I mean, we would have been all about prophecy in terms of Jesus. So, I mean, you'd hear sermons on how Jesus shows up in every book of the Bible, and they would say, like, in, this book he is this, in this book he is that, all the way from Genesis to Revelation. And it was a way for you to understand that Jesus is in every book of the Bible. But in terms of Mary, though, that was not something at all we would have emphasized. In terms of baptism, it's not something we would have emphasized. Certainly not in terms of what's really typologized in the Old Testament, which is Passover and the Last Supper, fulfilled Passover, which is part of this whole big train of manna in the desert and the fruit of the tree of life. And we would not have seen that typology at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know for most Protestants, typology is usually frowned upon unless it's something that the New Testament actually uses.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's kind of dismissed. But some of the titles for Mary are really quite simple, and they're almost fool people because of how simple they are. Like, for example, Seat of Wisdom.
I love the Seat of Wisdom one, because
explain that one because it's
okay. So what?
Yeah.
I don't know what county you live in. We live in Montgomery County, right? The seat of Montgomery County is, I actually don't even know what, because this is a big county. But the seat of Hamilton County in Ohio is Cincinnati, right? That's the head. It's the headquarters of Cincinnati, right? It's the county seat. You think of it as being like, who's the chairman of the board, right? He sits in the most important seat in the boardroom. The title Seat of Wisdom is a lot simpler than that. Like, if you look at an icon of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom, it's literally Mary with like Jesus sitting on her lap, right? Yep. And as we sing in the O antiphons and in O Come, Emmanuel, O come thou wisdom from on high, Jesus is wisdom incarnate, sitting on Mary's lap. So she's like literally the seat that the wisdom is sitting on. Like, I think that if you just hear a title like that and you don't understand, kind of the almost like the nursery rhyme type of understanding that some Catholics have of Mary, it can be really off-putting. And that applies to 100 titles for Mary. I was just talking this morning with Brother Rex. So we have a hermit on staff at the Coming Home Network, Brother Rex. He's a convert like all of us, and he prays for the intentions of our members. He's at Little Portion Hermitage. You should look him up. You can email him prayer requests. It's a great little service. But he's mentioning to me Our Lady Queen of Hermits or something like that. I'm like, who? What? I never heard of that one until this morning. I've been Catholic for 15 years, right? But there's that confusion. I remember being at on a vacation with a family reunion type thing, and one of my aunts had driven through New Orleans recently and seen the Church of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and she's like, "What is that?" It's like, well, it just means Our Lady of Swift Help, but it's got like some French connotations, and she's like, so how is she different from Our Lady of so-and-so? And I realized after a couple minutes of talking to her that she didn't realize that this is all the same lady, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's some confusion on that too. Like Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Fatima, Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Knock, and all whatever they are, in their various capacities, is all the same lady, and that can be very confusing to a Protestant, unless they have a Catholic who kind of talks like that in their life normally.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, Our Lady itself is the title. But
yeah, of course it does.
I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with Matt Swaim of ComingHomeNetwork.org about making Mary less scary. Stay tuned, folks. More to come at the other side of the break.
Welcome, Daniel. You're on the line. What's on your mind, brother?
Hi, I just wanted to share a testimony about Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I had a buddy at work who, he's a lukewarm Catholic guy, and I wanted him to start listening to the Terry and Jesse show, so I kept telling him to download the app, and he kept putting me off. So one day, I grabbed his phone and I downloaded the app for him. I went on vacation, and I kept telling him to listen to it. He was kind of put me off. I came back from vacation. He comes to my cubicle, and he says to me, "Hey, man, I've been listening to Terry and Jesse's show, and it's great." And it's made a big impact in his life. The guy, he's going to weekly adoration a couple times a week. He goes to the Mass in the morning. Mm-hmm. He's an on-fire Catholic, and he promotes the Terry and Jesse show on the Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Daniel, what a testimony. And I want to encourage our listeners to get those cards by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org and do what Daniel's doing. Go out and spread the faith by inviting people to listen to Virgin Most Powerful. Daniel, thanks for your testimony, brother. God love you.
You're welcome.
Hebrews 11:3 says, "By faith we come to understand." According to St. Augustine, understanding is the reward of faith. Therefore, seek not to understand that you may believe, but believe that you may understand. May God grant us a strong living faith in Him and His divine plan of salvation, and help us to believe so that we may understand.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. Hands On Apologetics, and we're talking about Mary. It's the month of May. It's the month of Mary, and Mary can be kind of scary for non-Catholics, and to help us come up with some of the titles commonly used by Catholics for Mary that I think Protestants would find not scary at all, but actually kind of beautiful, is our good friend Matt Swaim. And Matt, yeah, something like the Seat of Wisdom.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so not deep, but very beautiful, you know. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and if you look at iconography of Mary, you know, a lot of this stuff is just kind of natural. And this kind of hits on something else that I had to sort of get over as I was trying to understand not so much Marian doctrine, but Marian devotion. And this is something that a lot of Protestants have trouble separating in their minds, the difference between the dogmas about Mary and devotion to Mary. Because the dogma is the stuff that you got to believe. That's like when you stand at the Easter Vigil and you say, I believe and profess all that the Church teaches, the dogmas you got to believe, you know, that Mary is ever virgin, the, you know, Immaculate Conception, Assumption, all that stuff. The devotions, that's a different kind of, that's more like stuff you may believe. Right? Like nobody's required to accept every aspect of the apparition of Our Lady at Guadalupe. It's been put forth by the Church as honorable for devotion, and the Church has said that this is for real. But they don't say you are required to have a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, or you are not actually a Catholic. You know. Yeah. But some of this language and some of these scary titles for Mary that were really upsetting to me, I realized had more to do with poetry than they did with theology. So, like, say, for instance, if someone were to 200 years from now look at, like, you know, bad love ballads of the 70s or something like that, would they think, did you know that people used to walk across burning desert sands barefoot for their lovers? Did you know that some people's hearts exploded because they loved their lovers so much? Did you know that certain people would swim across entire oceans for the people that they loved? Like, there's this exaggerated language that goes with some of the poetry that we use. And once you understand that it's so much of Marian devotion is kind of, it has characteristics of love poetry, then it's not so bothersome after you get that kind of understanding. You start to realize that something like, you know, Mary is our life, our sweetness, and our hope. That's the way that you talk about someone who you deeply love, not someone who you are analyzing in a lab, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not a technical description. It's a romantic, kind of Baroque, you know, language. And you know, a lot of anti-Catholics in yesteryear used to make hay with that. They would pull out some of that more, you know, romantic, flowery language and try to analytically make it dogmatic statements, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like, what if you're like, I mean, it'd be like you calling your wife sweetheart, and somebody said, well, how do you know? Do you regularly eat your wife's heart? Yeah. You know, like, this is
right.
And if you read some of these like anti-Catholic texts, a lot of what they're drawing out, and this isn't the case for all of them, but a lot of them, what they'll draw is the most like sort of effusive and like, well, you use the word Baroque. I mean, but this language that's, you know, the kind of language that you use, like, you know, when I say to my son, I could just eat him up, right? Like, I'm not a cannibal, guys. I'm just saying it. because it's just a show of affection. And again, I think that Protestants who get hung up on this need to understand that there's distinctions that need to be made between the dogma and then the affections that flow forth from that dogma.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point too. And there also has to be a presumption of charity when you look at that stuff, because like you said, as Catholics, we're bound by what is authoritatively defined and taught by the Church, and that informs how this more romantic piety should be understood. Because if there is ever a conflict, the Church would say, get rid of it, right?
Yeah. Well, but the presumption of charity has to go both ways, right? Because we have to presume charity on the people that are attacking us about Mary.
Oh,
because why?
Absolutely.
Why do they think that we are in trouble for doing this? Because they think that we are obscuring Christ and we are putting an idol in the way of our salvation, right? So they see Mary as like an obstacle in your path, whereas we see Mary as like an outcropping on a sheer rock face that we can use to help us climb up to the summit, right? So they fundamentally see salvation in different terms than we do, so they're concerned about us. And when somebody starts attacking you for that, there may be an element of pride in there where they just like to go around and tell people that they're idiots all day long. But more often than not, in my experience, it's somebody who really doesn't want me to go to hell. And, I appreciate that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah, I appreciate it too, actually. That's why I never get angry. It's because if I was in their shoes, I would probably be doing the same thing, because it's an act of charity to be concerned about a person's salvation. And if they lapse into idolatry, I would hope somebody would correct me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's another aspect of this too, and that's something that a lot of Protestants don't get into, which is the history. And when you do get into history, one of the things that really weirds Protestants out about Catholicism is stuff like relics. Even some of these guys who are eaten by lions, we have like pieces of like blood-stained like clothes of theirs and stuff. And so if you go to the catacombs, which I've never been, but I know Protestants who have, you see bones of martyrs everywhere, and you see these things that they kept everything, right, from these people, except like nobody has ever claimed to have the body of Mary anywhere. And like, it's not like if she had died a martyr's death, we would have known it, right? And we would have had like an account of this, but on top of that, like, who would lose her body if she died naturally? Like, and it just got buried like everybody else. Like, who would be the idiot church secretary who'd be like, yeah, we're actually not sure where we buried, Jesus's mom. Like, the fact that there's like zero historical accounts of anybody having Mary's body anywhere or claiming to be this is the place that Mary was buried is a really weird thing if there's no such thing as the assumption, Right.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so there's always this different aspect to Mary that ultimately, it touches upon, it just keeps touching upon Jesus one way or another, or just evidence like with the Assumption. Yeah, very good. Matt, one title I love about Mary, and I think it really shows how Marian devotion can emphasize something about Jesus, is the title Queen Mother, or Mary as Queen, or Our Lady is actually, a title you give to a queen.
Yeah.
That is because if you look at the Old Testament history, the Queen Mother, the mother of the king, was honored by that title. So when we proclaim Mary as Queen Mother, what we're really doing is underlining or emphasizing Jesus' real factual kingship, because you wouldn't have a king without a Queen Mother.
Yeah, and that's because, so many Protestants are descendants from, England, right? And their view of monarchy is like, well, especially anybody who's been alive for the past, few decades, there has been no king in England, right? It's just been the queen. So you just assume that the queen is the absolute monarch, and that's not at all how she functions in Jewish Davidic kingship. She is. I mean, Solomon had how many gajillion wives and porcupines? Which one of them is going to be the queen? None of them, right? It's the mother of the king who gets the queenship. So, and again, that's one of those things that unless you understand, how that sort of functioned in the line of David, then of course you're going to be thinking of Queen Elizabeth or somebody like that. And when you think of like Mary as Queen Mother, or Queen of Heaven, right, or Queen of Peace, or Queen of Angels, or any of the queenish titles that she has.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, because if anything, the king wanted to extol his mother because she was the living sign of his legitimacy to the throne. Because his mother received the promise from the previous king that her son would sit on the throne, just like Mary receives from the true king, God in heaven, through the angel, that her son will sit on David's throne.
I mean, even English historians sort of get this if they think about it hard enough. What was Henry VIII's problem? He couldn't find a legitimate heir because he couldn't find someone who could actually legitimately be a queen.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, if you think back hard, again, this is the experience. Queen Elizabeth is, I think, immortal. I'm not sure. I mean, she's like the John Paul II figure in the Church of England who, like, when she dies, people will be like, this is the only only monarch we've ever known, right? So that's the point of reference for so many people, and so I think that's why that title can be so confusing.
Yeah, very good. But I love that because, like I said, it emphasizes Jesus. If he's truly king, then he truly has to have a queen mother. If he's truly the new Adam, then you have to have a Eve, right? The new Eve. And you can just go through the whole, all the different types and stuff. Where really, Mary simply magnifies what Jesus is.
Well, and again, this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning with the inattentional blindness. Once you start to realize Mary's spot in a lot of places, you start to realize that she's in places in Scripture that you hadn't noticed her before. Like how prominently she figures in Luke's Gospel with pondering all these things in her heart's being pierced with a sword, and the typological aspect of this with Eve really comes forth in John's Gospel. So, and if all we had was John's Gospel, we wouldn't even know Jesus' mom's name, because he always refers to her as woman or as the mother of Jesus, which is typologically connecting back to the way that Eve used to be referred to, right?
Right.
So, and all these things, and she's there at Pentecost, right? She's there at the cross. She's there in a bunch of these places that the apostles aren't even there. But at the same time, there's places where the apostles are and she's not. So, I mean, she's not in the upper room at the Last Supper. So there's a distinction there. But still, and again, this is also because, depending on your tradition, women may not hold as high of a place in your denomination. So the Mary thing may just be a little awkward for you. I mean, they don't have something like the longstanding Catholic tradition that has had as like its number one Christian of all time, like a woman.
Yeah.
So
very good. Well, Matt, hey, I can't believe the hour is flowing. Where can people go to get all your great stuff at Coming Home Network?
Yeah, come see us at chnetwork.org. Come visit me, Ken Hensley, John Mark Grodi, even Brother Rex, Marcus, and the lot. chnetwork.org.
All right. Thanks a lot, Matt. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the program. It's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center here, turn off the dojo lights. Thank you for coming on board. Coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk with the Terry and Jesse Show. And I hope everybody has a blessed day. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.